So, Eamon, the prosecution case has come to a close in the trial of Ruth Lawrence, who's accused of murdering Anthony Keegan and Eoin O'Connor in 2014. The trial has heard that these two men were collecting a drug debt when a sort of a row broke out. And there's been this kind of presence in the trial, who's Ruth Lawrence's boyfriend, who's been named in it, but he's sort of lurking in the background, and we have wondered, what the story is with him. But today, the jury heard where he is and why.
Yeah, there was, I suppose, a bit more information came out. There was kind of 4 sort of witnesses that were called this morning, which is day 13 of evidence being heard in front of the jury. And a lot of it was just kind of housekeeping. It was a little bit about, when she was charged and she made any reply to the charges. There was a couple of supplementary statements just to correct some of the long list of the slideshow showing mobile phone maps, and one or two of them, there were a couple of typos, so there was that in. But there was also a detective, Garda Kevin O'Brien, and he was part of the investigation team, and he was asked about he was asked about different information about when the Symes had given their interviews to the Gardaí after they returned, when the bodies had been discovered on the 26th of May.
These were friends of Ruth Lawrence and Neville.
And they're both, and they gave evidence in court as well about hearing Ruth talking about having shot Eoin O'Connor, and Neville shooting Anthony Keegan and finishing off Eoin O'Connor. So they were asked then, so we heard about the extradition proceedings, because they'd fled to South Africa, and they made their way from Rosslare to Pembroke to London, and from there they went on to South Africa.
And the Symes, didn't they give evidence, the father and daughter? They gave evidence about how they too left the country, went to London, and were kind of with Ruth Lawrence and Neville.
Yeah, and they were staying in this block of flats with somebody connected to someone that Neville knew. And after the other couple had more or less disappeared, leaving them there, they were dropped off at a homeless shelter. And a few weeks after that they came back.
They came back and
they gave these interviews
statements.
Then in May and June.
So we sort of, from their evidence, we sort of leave Ruth Lawrence and her partner Neville, who's described as during the trial, in London. They've disappeared, and we've no idea where they've gone.
Yeah. And so what we heard from Detective Garda O'Brien was that they obviously did their investigation. They had their statements at this stage, and in October 2016, they issued. It was October 2016. The Director of Public Prosecutions directed that both Ruth Lawrence and Van der Westhuizen be charged with the murders of the two men. Extraditions proceedings were started, and that led to an extradition warrant being produced for Ruth in 2021 in Pretoria in South Africa.
Okay, so that's 2 years after the murders, because the murders happen sort of.
Well, when we get to
in April of 2014,
So the first extradition proceedings, like the warrant from Ireland, issued happened in 2016.
So 2 years later, so they issued the warrant. Is that knowing where they are, or is it a general warrant?
It's well, that wasn't stated in court,
right?
But that warrant then led to a warrant then in Pretoria in 2021, and then she was produced, as they say, brought to court in Durban in November 2022. And then and that was a review to surrendering them. It was actually Neville that was produced in Durban in November 2022 and brought before a magistrate with the view of surrendering him, as they put it. And they went through the fact that he was, at the time, he's a South African citizen. He was in a prison called Westhuizen in Durban. He was serving time for 6 counts, which included kidnap, attempted murder, and had been sentenced to 15 years in imprisonment. And the final order stated that committing him to prison, basically to await the minister's decision on whether to extradite him to Ireland. Now, we hear a little bit more in the cross-examination. So the guards know that basically they were told that he's serving his time in prison. He might become available in 2027 when he's eligible for parole, but otherwise his final sentence, his release date, would bring it to 2035, which would be quite some time away.
He's eligible for parole, but of course people can apply for parole and they won't necessarily get it.
Exactly, yeah. And so more or less they said, look, if he's paroled in 2027, the extradition proceedings can become live again then. Now, Now, Patrick Gageby, who's acting for Ruth Lawrence, he asked the officer, just for a little bit more details about the offence for which he was jailed. And the information given, that what the jury heard was that there were 3 or 4 teenagers that were at a tattoo parlour where Neville van der Westhuizen was working, along with 3 other men. There was a phone on charge, and the youths supposedly took the phone. They were followed out by the 4 men. They were assaulted. They were poisoned. They were locked up in a room for the night, and one of them subsequently died. And all 4 men were charged with kidnap murder and attempted murder. And that was in February 2017.
2017, that was. Okay.
So that's what the jury have heard about Neville van der Westhuizen.
So 2016, the Gardaí issue warrants for Ruth Lawrence and for Neville van der Westhuizen. And they issue those warrants, but we don't know if they're aware of their location, because warrants can be issued, I think. European arrest warrants or international arrest warrants can be issued for people.
No, I think they were able to establish they had gone to South Africa.
They were able to establish
that. But apart from that, whether the South African police knew where to find them was another issue. But whatever delay there was from 2016, it took until 2021 before one of them, Neville, was brought before the courts, and then it was
he was already processed at that stage.
Yeah. And so we did hear as well about she was.
I'm sorry, Eamon, the crime that he committed, that he was convicted of committing, which involved this incident with the teenager and a number of them being kidnapped and beaten up, etc., over a stolen mobile phone charger. That happens in 2017. Was there detail given to the jury about when he actually came to court on that?
No, there was nothing else. There was nothing else said about that. What we did hear from Garda Raymond Flynn then, he was in Kells Garda Station. And again, there was a little bit of housekeeping with him. He was asked to compile an index regarding this huge amount of phone records that the jury were given. But he was also the officer who charged Ruth Lawrence when she arrived on the 25th of May in 2023 at Dublin Airport, 5:15. He met the extradition unit who had her in custody. He told her she was being arrested. She was brought to Trim Garda Station, and later that evening then she was charged with the 2 murders of Eoin O'Connor and Anthony Keegan. She was cautioned, the standard caution which you often hear about. There wasn't much made about this. She made no reply. She was brought to a special sitting at Trim where the same officer gave the same evidence of charging. And of course there was no bail at the time because there's never any bail on murder charges. And so that kind of that was kind of, I suppose, the finishing off of some of the housekeeping on the prosecution part. Now, while they've effectively closed it, it's still not formally closed. They could still actually bring someone back to the dock if needs be. But we're expecting the defence now to start, and it's originally, the jury were told, the 14th of November is the finish date. So we don't really know how long that's going to take. And the jury will be told by the judge if there's going to be any change to that.
Because a defence case can put up no evidence if they so wish, or they can put up and they could also, it will be Ruth Lawrence's decision whether she goes into the witness box or not.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very rare to see a murder accused give evidence, because that means they're opening themselves up for cross-examination. So it's often a risk that I think defence lawyers don't like to take. But yeah, so we don't know if she's going to be called. It's perfectly within her rights to suggest, to her defence team that she wants to get up. They may advise her not to, or they may advise her to do it, and she may not want to. So whichever way that could go.
She's totally denied these charges. Now the men's remains, Anthony Keegan and Eoin O'Connor's remains, were found on Inchicup Island on the 26th of May 2014. They'd both been shot in the head, and there's evidence been given about those injuries. They were some time left basically lying on this island in overgrowth as opposed to buried before they were found. But the story that has been played out in court and in front of the jury is that Mr. Symes and also Neville van der Westhuizen were buying drugs and were meeting up with Keegan and Eoin O'Connor, that there was money allegedly owed to them. They were going up to collect it, and they had kind of kept, Keegan and O'Connor had kept their families informed where they were going, what they were doing. And literally as the phones go down, within hours, the family are up looking for them. They're fearful something's gone wrong, and they inform police. So the Gardaí are on this case really, really quickly.
Yeah, and certainly the family are onto it pretty quickly as well. Now, the whole kind of, I suppose, location of the phones is critical to the case as well. And we heard from Sarah Sked, this would have been on Wednesday and Thursday. So her evidence was, it was quite lengthy, but it was easier to understand than the previous kind of technical stuff, which was all about the guys who were extracting the information, the phone records, and there was 12 phones that were at the centre of all this. So Sarah Sked was the one who put together all this analysis in a kind of a whole series of maps and charts to kind of make it explicable to the jury. So I think it was mentioned in court there was dozens of pages. I think it's 87-page booklet. So this was gone through in great detail. So like she's turned up in other like well-known cases as the phone analyst, and so basically it was to see what calls and connections were used and what cell sites. And by cell sites, it's what we commonly refer to as the masts. And so the whole kind of, so as well as locations then, because some of the phones, if they're examining from the networks, all they're going to get is location. And if a call is made or if there's some kind of communication, they can figure out whether it was a text or whether it was a call, but they don't hear the calls. The calls aren't recorded and the texts aren't recorded. But in the case of Eoin O'Connor and some of the phones that were handed over by the Symes and by Ruth Lawrence, they were able to extract some of the texts from those phones. And it was from Eoin O'Connor's phone then that we kind of get a sense of sort of the pressure maybe he was under. He's been asked by, there's Mr. CD, anything yet? He sent one message to a person saying, I'm heading down to Woodlands. Basically, he gave the address of Jason and Stacey Symes and saying, this is where I'm going in case anything happens to me. And then there's other kind of, so that was pretty ominous. And then
so he's getting pressure from somebody else? Is that what you mean?
So he's kind of, well, it's a sense of anything yet, or have you heard from him, and this kind of stuff. And that's coming from Mr. CD.
An unidentified person in the background, obviously.
And we've heard about Mr. CD before in the case. But they're locating all of this. So they're basically tracking Anthony Keegan and Eoin O'Connor. They can see on the Monday they go up and they appear in Cavan, and then they go back to Dublin, and then they come back up on the Tuesday again, and basically right up until 2038 on April the 22nd, the Tuesday. The phone is active. He's sending texts. He's taking calls, and there's quite a lot of them. There's like 60 on the Monday. There's a lot of back and forth between the various people, between Mr. CD, between a phone that's associated with the Ruth Lawrence and Neville van der Wezen household, which is a clumsy way of saying it. But there was 4 phones that were associated with them. One phone in particular was identified as being Ruth's, because they were able to find different messages that were on her. Sarah Sked was talking about downloading kind of text messages and then doing a word search like for Ruth or for Nev to see what will come up. And, but Nev also brings up the word never. So there's a huge amount of going through all of these things to try and find the relevant information to the investigation. And so you're getting all this back and forth at certain times. Then the phone goes off. There's a one that's kind of color coded for ease, that they call it the pink phone, and this is an unregistered phone that appears in Dunshaughlin on the 18th. And is only used on the 18th and 19th of April. And if you remember, this is when the group, according to the Symes, they travelled down to meet somebody in Dublin. They were left sitting in Burger King till all hours, and eventually they go back to the cottage, and she sees the bricks of white powder. And so you're getting all this, but they're everything was being proved in this. So every single mast was described by the technical witnesses, like whether it was pointing northeast and northwest and all the rest of it. And so they're building up this picture of the various movements and the different connections between the various people. But I suppose the reason, again, Eamon, they have Ruth Lawrence's phone and some of the phones from the Symes was because they essentially handed them over. Yeah, because Jason Symes was being questioned that week in Cavan and then Navan Garda Station on the Wednesday and the Thursday. And while the 2 women were sitting in a fast food restaurant in Navan, they were approached by the guards and they handed over certain phones at that stage. So they had some phones. For instance, Anthony Keegan's phone was never found. So there was nothing from him heard in court. There was one text that he had sent to Eoin O'Connor, I'm going with you. And that's the only kind of, I suppose, direct message that we heard from Anthony Keegan. You know, and even like some of it's kind of family stuff. He says, look, I have to go down. This is Eoin O'Connor texting somebody saying, like, I have to go down the country again. He says, I'm not even able to go to the match. And then we previously heard from one of his brothers that, you know, he was trying to ring him to tell him the result of this local soccer game and wasn't able to do it.
Did Jason Syme's daughter have his phone with her in the fast food restaurant? She was minding her father's phone.
She was minding her father's phone while he was, and it was one of his as well. Yeah. So as I said, like, you know, they went through all these 12 phones. Some of them, it wasn't quite clear. Well, it wasn't. It's not really sure exactly whose phone it was. But there is a lot of them, and they're all clustered around kind of a mast that covers the cottage. Now, again, like, you know, Sarah Sked was saying, look, it gives a general location. Like, it'll say that somebody was in the mast, so that will kind of put you in the area of the cottage, but there's no way you can tell whether somebody is inside the house or outside the house or in the field next door, and there's certainly no way of knowing who actually used that. So, you know, although somebody, you know, it might be the phone identified as Ruth, we don't know if it was somebody else using that phone at that time. So it was a tough couple of days, I think.
And I suppose the real takeaway there from the end of it is that from the closing of the prosecution case and for the jury is that this Neville van der Westhuizen, the partner of Ruth Lawrence, you know, this character who's kind of there in the evidence in the background in the shadows, the reason he's not beside her in court facing charges is because he's in prison in South Africa serving time for his role in what sounds like a very brutal sort of kidnap and attack and murder of a young man. There's a warrant issued for his arrest, so he's obviously wanted on murder charges here in Ireland, and he will be extradited back once he gets parole.
Well, it'll go back to court in South Africa when he's available, I suppose, to the Irish authorities. But for the moment, he's not available, and the earliest possible date is going to be 2027.
But I suppose you can't extradite somebody for questioning. You can only extradite them if there's a charge levelled against them. So that's what that's kind of indicating, that there is murder charges.
Well, it was actually heard the DPP, the DPP directed charges be brought. And of course, she was brought back then and charged in Trim Garda Station when she was flown back in May 23. Interesting
case. Okay, well, look, we will come back to it when you're back from court next week, I suppose.
No worries.
Thanks, Eamon.
Do it. Always a pleasure.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs, and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.